Friends, welcome back. Just Christina here, and we're going to go over an article called Slavery's Price, Liberty's Value. And I really can't tell you much about this or where it comes from. It's dated February 18th, 1956. And so let's go ahead and take a look here. It's obviously from a newspaper article. You know, a photocopy of a newspaper article. February 18, 1956. They tell of slavery's price, liberty's value. So I'm going to set this aside just so I can read it to you, because it's pretty interesting here. It says, Frankfurt, Germany. Nothing smells as good as the fresh air of freedom. This is a statement made by a woman who knows, one who was recently released after 11 years of slave labor in Siberia. When the first women slave laborers held by the Russians as war criminals or political prisoners were released, along with almost 10,000 other German prisoners late last year, the Weekend presented an exclusive report on what life under the communist heel was like for these women. This week, after more than 3 months of freedom, those same women told about their newfound life of freedom in the West. The report is a startling contrast. 3 months ago, these women were telling how few had survived the communist ordeals of starvation, torture, beatings, and in one case at least being thrown into a snowdrift in 30 below zero weather. The few who did return are now readjusting to a life where freedom is like air, everywhere, where the health of an individual is important and where personal happiness does not depend upon the whims of a power-maddened few. All right, here we go. And now we're going to read about this little case study here. Erica S. is typical of the women returnees. A tall, hunky blonde with deep blue eyes, her furrowed forehead and tired face make her look much older than her 35 years. She gained 10 pounds since her return. Can you imagine what it's like to be hungry for years and years? She asked. Often when we were in Siberia, the only food we had was a soup made out of hot water and bits of tree roots or wild grass. Originally from East Prussia, Erica had a normal life until World War II, when she married a boyhood sweetheart and learned that he had died in the war while she was giving birth to a son. Unable to find work, she was forced into an existence that almost came to an end when her baby died of starvation. The Russians then imprisoned her for saying the West is better. Sent to a Siberian slave camp with thousands of other men and women from all over the world, she and another prisoner never knew where they were until they located the camp on the map of an official's room that they were cleaning. They were near the North Pole. That's interesting, isn't it? What else is up there? Oh, if only we could get over the pole, her friend sighed. America is right down on the other side. After 11 years in Siberia, clearing land, digging ditches, and helping construct buildings, Erica is broken physically. Suffering from an overworked heart, she has terrible headaches now if she tries to read or concentrate on close work, but she says she's one of the lucky ones who came out alive. Just walking down a street, in freedom, I know how fortunate I am, and I thank God that my life was spared. The Russians told us all the while we were in prison of how terrible things were in West Germany. No clothes, no food, the entire towns bombed and destroyed, they said. When I found my family at Host near Frankfurt, I was surprised to see buildings still standing and all the new houses and offices being constructed. I couldn't believe it when I saw all the food and clothes for sale. The Russians had told us the Westerners were starving. When I first arrived in Camp Friedland, I was dazed with happiness at being free in the West. The Red Cross fed us and helped us find our relatives. As I got off the train, an American girl rushed up and handed me a package. I tried to explain that I couldn't speak any English, but she insisted that I take the gift. Inside, I found a blouse, a sweater, and a handbag. These were the first feminine clothes I'd had in 10 years. At first, with the short hairstyles, I found it hard to tell the men and women apart. But when I went to prison, the feminine style was short skirts and long hair. Later that day, when I saw a purple and pink car, I thought I had lost my mind. The last cars I had seen were 12 years ago in the East Zone when they were all one color. When I saw the multicolored American autos, I knew that the world had changed without me. The first few days of being home were like Christmas. My mother brought me some gold loop earrings. It was the first time I'd had earrings on since I was sent to prison. My ears had been pierced when I was a child, and until I became a prisoner, I had always liked to wear earrings. This is Erica S., who heard about television in her slave labor camp, but only recently learned what it actually was. Nylon and Perlon were unknown to her. She now feels differently about church. The Russians had told her long ago to forget about God. Okay, and she says, I felt as if I was a woman again. People were so kind. I had nothing except the prison clothes I had brought back, heavy woolen pants and a thick man's work jacket and thick leather boots. But I needed everything. I got letters from many stores in Frankfurt and Host, Hoechst, Hoist. I think it's Host, I'm not sure. One Frankfurt department store gave me a $50 German mark or $12 credit to buy clothes. Another sent me a letter to say a pair of shoes free would be given to every returned prisoner. I received free tickets for movies. A man from whom I'd worked in East Prussia heard that I'd come home and wrote offerings to help if I needed anything. He's now in business in Kiel, Kiel, and has brought his family from the East too. We women prisoners had never heard of Purion or nylon. We had heard about television, but no idea what it was actually like. I never thought that I'd consider it a treat to go to church. Until 1948, we had to work every day, including Sunday. Later, we were permitted to rest on Sunday, but we were not permitted any religious services. The Russians told us to forget all about God and that... Sorry, I just lost my spot. Told us to forget all about God and that the rest of the world had forgotten us. If we were caught praying, we were punished. The usual treatment was to take away the poor meals we had. Now it seemed wonderful to be able to go to church on Sunday. We were all sick and exhausted when we got to Camp Friedland, but for the unfortunate ones who returned to the East, life has been very difficult. Here, the government allows us 36 German marks, or $8.64 a week, for 6 months as sick pay. It isn't a lot of money, but it means that we can rest and get medical treatment until we are able to look for work. Erica is sick. Her legs were frozen the first winter she worked in Russia, and now her ankles are swollen up to double the normal thickness. The doctor had warned her that her heart is overtaxed, so it sounds like she has edema to me. Let's see. The doctor warned her that her heart is overtaxed, but with rest, she hopes to be able to work as a photo lab assistant before her 6 months is up. Meanwhile, she is living with her parents and also refugees from the East. Okay, this is interesting too, because then it gives a German, es kommt auf den Menschen an. My German is terrible. I haven't spoken German since high school class, but it seems to me here that it's just the article saying, yeah, I don't even know. I don't speak well enough German to see. Yeah, okay, so moving on. Marguerite M. received this postcard from a prisoner friend who had spent 10 years in a slave labor camp. The card came from the camp near the North Pole last week, and it's proof that many prisoners being held by the communists are still serving in slave camps in Siberia. No matter what the Russians say, we former prisoners know that there are thousands like us still hidden away in slave labor camps and prisons, Marguerite said. Marguerite M. is another prisoner who recently returned. A former home economics teacher, she married a doctor in the Marines. After an 18-day honeymoon, they were separated by the war. She never saw him again, and she believes that he was killed. Marguerite spent 10 years as a Russian prisoner and in a camp 300 miles north of Moscow. Marguerite had hoped that her friends were released from prison when she was shipped back to Camp Friedland, but just recently she received a Russian card from a fellow prisoner. The girl, a former writer from Bucharest, had thought that she would be allowed to return to her home when the other prisoners were released, but she wrote that she and many of her other friends are still being held captive by the Russians in the slave labor camp near the North Pole. No matter what the Russians say, we former prisoners know that there are thousands more like us hidden away in slave labor camps and prisons. Thousands, of course, have died in the camps, but many more are still alive and not being returned, Marguerite said. So that's really disgusting and horrible, and I'm sure that it still goes on today. Please keep in mind that this is a dated article from 1956, but who isn't to say that 63 years later, we have not truly learned the error of our ways as human beings, and we are still enslaving other humans and causing them suffrage and holding them hostage in these camps. So 11 years of slave labor in a Siberian labor camp. It sounds like hell. Truly, truly the epitome of hell. So this is another article from this notebook. We really only have a couple left to go through. We just did this one earlier, The Enemy. But as I promised, we're going to go through one called, right here, The New U.S. Constitution is Ready. So that's going to be our next video. And then we have The Trade Trap. And then we have Limit Government, Not Terms. Okay, and then we have a couple of individual documents here that were printed out. The Hidden Tyranny, The Issue That Dwarfs All Other Issues, Part 1 and 2. And this is a rare treasure that has a backstory, so we're going to save that for a whole nother video all by itself. So, and then some more things from my grandfather that don't belong in this notebook. So that's where we're going to stop. Thanks for joining me. Just Christina signing out.